Welcome to part 2 of this video. I'm going to apply glazing resin onto these two pendants to give them a nice finish. If you remember from part 1, the pendant on the left was one of them. The pendant on the right is not the one that I produced in part 1. The fantasy moon paint overtook the whole pendant when it dried, and the effect was not very pleasant at all. So I scraped it out and have redone it with this Prisme paint, Pebeo Prisme paint, and in this sort of turquoisey green colour. So I'm now going to mix up the resin and apply it. The resin comes in two parts. There's the resin itself in part A, and part B is the hardener, and it's mixed up in a ratio of 2 parts resin to 1 part hardener. I use these little plastic measuring cups that I bought off eBay. They're very inexpensive. They've got a little measure on the side, so it's very easy to mix the 2-to-1 ratio on these, and I stir them with these cocktail sticks. Now it's very important when you mix these together to get the hardener thoroughly mixed into the resin, but with trying to avoid minimize the put my teeth back in to minimize the number of air bubbles that are in the resin. But these can be removed later with a flame, but it's easier if you don't get them into the resin in the first place. As you can see, this the glazing resin is thicker than the casting resin, and when applied into the pendants, it actually forms a nice domed surface. So I'm just trying to film and do this at the same time. Now mix that. There's also, you can see that there is some bubbles in there, but gently stirring, trying to get to mix the resin off the sides of the container and then the hardener, because it is quite gloopy. Any resin on the side of the container won't have hardener mixed in unless you stir it thoroughly. It's difficult to see in here, but when you mix in the hardener, it actually goes cloudy at the beginning. And it's a matter of just stirring and stirring and stirring. A bit like using the Fantasy Moon and Prism paints. It's very important to stir those as well. Okay, I've got a few big air bubbles in there, but not lots of little ones. Stirring in different directions to get it thoroughly and completely mixed in. Again, I'm going to go right around the edges. Oop. Well, I think I'm going to stop the video now and carry on stirring, because it'll be the most boring video ever, just watching me stir. Okay, I'll come back to you when it's fully mixed. Okay, when it's totally mixed, it actually goes back to clear again. Although there's some bubbles in there, the whole mix is actually clear. So it's now ready to apply to the pendants, or whatever it is you're going to apply it to. Now I'm going to use a lolly stick to drop it in. You can use a pipette, but I personally find it's more difficult with a pipette because of the sort of thicker nature of this glazing resin, that I find it difficult to apply with a pipette. But that's just my personal preference. Just try what you think, find the best method that works for you. Okay, let's give this a go. Okay, let's try the first one. We'll pick some up, just gently drop it down into the middle. As you can see, it tends to try and form its own level. You can encourage it up into the other bits. I don't know whether it shows up on the camera, but the colours, the underlying colours of the pendant actually become immediately much more brighter and vibrant. Just gently pushing this. Into all the areas. I'll actually do a side view of this in a minute so you can actually see the domed . One thing I actually forgot to say, it's quite important that you actually apply this on a level surface, as you could get it running over one end and having, in an extreme situation, no resin at one side. You can gradually build up. That's it. I can't see any air bubbles in that. The air bubbles are dissipated. Oh dear, sounds like I've swallowed a dictionary. Dissipated. They've cleared. Okay, moving on to the next one. Put a little bit more in that. There you go. See, it's now formed a nice level surface, and it's domed around the edges. I just want to show you one that I did before. Well, this is two Prisme colours. As you can see, it's actually, I don't know whether that shows up. When I mixed this had a lot of air bubbles in it. Now, if you do get air bubbles, you can actually apply a flame, like a lighter, or using a lighter or something like that across the surface, and it helps the air bubbles dissipate. But if you get the, what I found is if you overdo the flame, you actually get this dimpling. I don't know whether, oh, there we go, you can see that it's not a smooth glass-like finish, and that was caused by applying too much flame. So yes, the flame will work, but don't get it too close and use it sparingly. It's better to take your time with the mixing, get the no air bubbles in the resin in the first place, or very few, and having to try to move them later. What I'm going to try with this one is actually, I'm going to move the, whoop, wrong way. I'm actually going to apply a little bit more resin over the top with the hope that it will fill. Oh, so I spilled some there. That it will actually cover and conceal. Actually, I think what I'm going to do is use a cocktail stick actually. Right, that looks much better. I'm hoping that's going to dry nice and clear. Right, I've actually overfilled it and spilled. I'll clear that up. Okay, I think that's all. Looking at it, there's a little bit there. It's very, although it needs a little bit of encouraging into corners and things, the resin is actually self-leveling and creates its own little yeah, that all looks good. Yeah, the resin is actually self-leveling and will even out across the whole pendant over time, but with this lovely sort of domed edge. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave these to cure now. It needs at least 24 hours. The room that I'm in at the moment is actually quite cold, so it'll be touch dry after 24 hours, but I prefer to leave it at least 48 hours to fully harden and to become tough. Else I've found that, especially in colder rooms, that it can actually mark or scuff before it's ready. I'm quite pleased with those. I'm very pleased with the effects. I love the Pebeo fantasy paints, and I enjoy making these little pendants with them. They make great gifts. Okay, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I'll be producing a lot more. I have realised watching them back that I say lots of times, and